Most people think muscle recovery is just about what you eat or how much protein you consume. But that's only part of the story. What's often overlooked and what neuroscience now clearly shows is that muscle recovery is primarily governed by your nervous system. That's right. Before your muscles even get the chance to rebuild, your brain and spinal cord are already laying the foundation for that process to begin. Let me explain. Every time you train, whether you're lifting weights, sprinting, or doing any form of resistance work, you're placing stress on the muscles. Microtears occur in the muscle fibers, and your body responds by triggering an adaptive process. But here's what's key. That entire process starts with neural signaling. The motor neurons that control your muscle fibers, the proprioceptive feedback from your joints and tendons, the release of certain neurotransmitters, these all act as the first responders. Without that neural communication, your body doesn't even register the need to repair. This is where things get really interesting. When the nervous system is under chronic stress, sleep-deprived, nutrient-deficient, or inflamed, it actually inhibits recovery. The brain interprets physical stress differently, often as a threat, and begins diverting energy away from muscle repair toward survival mechanisms like cortisol release. That's why even with enough protein, you might not recover well. The message to repair isn't being sent effectively. Now, when the nervous system is balanced and optimized through proper sleep, specific nutrients, and focused mental states, something different happens. The brain initiates a cascade of signals that promote the release of growth hormone, testosterone, and brain-derived neurotrophic factor (BDNF), all of which are essential for neuromuscular adaptation. Your muscle fibers not only recover faster, but actually rebuild stronger. This connection between brain and muscle isn't just theoretical. Electromyography studies show that the intentionality of your movement, your focus during a workout, directly influences the recruitment of muscle fibers. But it goes further. Even during rest and recovery, your mental state, your breath, your emotional regulation, all feed back into how well your body rebuilds. So the idea that you can just train hard, eat a shake, and grow muscle is outdated. Your nervous system is either helping you build or silently blocking your gains. The key takeaway here is this: muscle growth doesn't start in the gym or the kitchen, it starts in the brain. When we talk about rebuilding muscle quickly and efficiently, we have to talk about the biochemical switch that tells your body it's time to grow. That switch is something called M2 or mechanistic target of rapamycin. It's not just a buzzword in the fitness world, it's a central regulator of muscle protein synthesis. But here's the crucial point. M2 doesn't just get activated by exercise. It gets turned on by specific nutrients, and the most potent among them is an amino acid called leucine. Leucine is one of the 3 branched-chain amino acids, and it's incredibly powerful in signaling the body to build muscle. When leucine levels rise in the bloodstream after eating, they interact with nutrient sensors inside your muscle cells, and that interaction directly stimulates M2. Think of M2 as the foreman of a construction site. It tells the cellular machinery, begin building muscle tissue now. Without that signal, all the raw materials, protein, carbs, fats, don't get assembled properly. The signal matters more than the materials. What's really interesting from a neuroscience and physiology perspective is that your body doesn't just respond to leucine passively, it's scanning for it. The brain and body are in constant communication via hormones and neurotransmitters, and when you ingest leucine-rich food, you're not just feeding the muscle, you're giving your brain confirmation that it's safe and appropriate to shift into an anabolic growth-promoting state. This is especially important in the hours following training, when your nervous system is primed to absorb and act on these molecular cues. Here's where this becomes actionable. Not all proteins are created equal in their leucine content. Foods like eggs, beef, chicken, and certain dairy products contain high concentrations of leucine. But it's not just about hitting a daily protein number, it's about getting enough leucine at each meal to consistently activate M2. Studies show that around 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine per meal is the threshold to reliably trigger this muscle-building signal. And the reason this matters so much is because we often focus on quantity, how much protein, how many calories, but we ignore quality and signaling power. Leucine has that signaling power. It acts fast, and when combined with resistance training and a primed nervous system, it creates a compounding effect: faster recovery, more muscle protein synthesis, and greater strength gains over time. So if your goal is to rebuild muscle quickly, the question isn't just am I eating enough protein? The real question is, am I activating mTOR enough to make that protein useful? There's a common belief out there that in order to maximize muscle recovery, you need to rely on supplements, whey protein powders, BCAA drinks, synthetic meal replacements. And while those can have a place in certain contexts, the data tell a different story when it comes to optimal muscle rebuilding. In fact, there's one food that continues to outperform many of these engineered supplements in direct head-to-head studies, and that food is the whole egg. Now, I want to be specific here. We're not just talking about egg whites, we're talking about the entire egg yolk included. Whole eggs provide a complete amino acid profile, including a rich concentration of leucine, which we just discussed as the key trigger for mTOR activation. But what sets whole eggs apart isn't just the amount of protein they contain, it's how the body responds to that protein in context, meaning with the other nutrients that naturally accompany it. Several studies have now shown that eating whole eggs after resistance training leads to significantly greater muscle protein synthesis compared to eating the same amount of protein from egg whites alone. That's a critical distinction. You're getting the same grams of protein, but the response from your body is entirely different when the yolk is included. Why? Because the yolk contains essential micronutrients, vitamins A, D, E, K2, choline, and healthy fats that enhance the absorption and utilization of the amino acids in the whites. This is where nutrient synergy comes into play, and it's something synthetic supplements often fail to replicate. From a neuroscience perspective, there's also a hormonal and cognitive component here. The dietary fats and micronutrients in the yolk help support optimal hormone production, like testosterone and growth hormone, which are deeply involved in the recovery process. Choline, found abundantly in egg yolks, supports acetylcholine production, which is critical for neuromuscular signaling. So when you consume whole eggs, you're not just feeding muscle tissue, you're supporting the entire brain-muscle axis that governs performance, adaptation, and repair. It's also worth noting that whole foods like eggs provide satiety and improve compliance with nutrition over the long term. When people feel nourished and stable after meals, they're more likely to stay consistent with their recovery routines. Consistency is the real driver of results over time. So while there's a time and place for convenience products, if your goal is to rebuild muscle fast and in a way that's sustainable, nutrient-dense, and aligned with how the brain and body actually work, then the whole egg is one of the most powerful tools available. If we really want to understand how to rebuild muscle fast, we have to go beyond the surface-level thinking of just hitting macros or drinking protein shakes. The truth is, not all proteins are created equal, not in how they're digested, not in how they're utilized by the body, and certainly not in how they trigger the brain-body mechanisms responsible for muscle repair. There's one food that consistently stands out in the research, and it might surprise you because of how simple and accessible it is. It's the whole egg. Whole eggs, not just the whites, offer something incredibly unique from a neuromuscular and biochemical perspective. You see, most people still believe that egg whites are the clean source of protein, so they ditch the yolk thinking they're doing themselves a favor. But when you remove the yolk, you're removing the very nutrients that make that protein actually useful for muscle repair. In well-controlled studies, comparing the muscle protein synthesis response between whole eggs and egg whites, where the protein content was exactly the same, the whole eggs led to significantly greater muscle building effects. That might sound counterintuitive at first, but here's why it works. The yolk contains critical micronutrients like vitamin D, choline, omega-3 fats, and phospholipids, all of which play a direct role in how the body absorbs and signals protein synthesis at the cellular level. These nutrients don't just help you recover, they amplify the signal. They interact with pathways like mTOR, enhance hormone function, and support neural signaling, especially in motor neurons that regulate muscle contraction and coordination. And it's not just the body responding here, it's the brain too. Choline from the yolk supports the production of acetylcholine, which is the primary neurotransmitter your brain uses to communicate with muscle fibers. That communication is essential, not just for movement but for adaptation. Your brain needs to register the work that's been done, and then initiate the right hormonal and biochemical cascade to start rebuilding stronger tissue. Without that loop being properly supported, recovery slows down, strength gains stall, and muscle protein synthesis plateaus. What's also important is the real-world sustainability of whole eggs. They're inexpensive, nutrient-dense, easy to prepare, and they support both immediate recovery and long-term neurological function. They offer the kind of complete recovery support that a scoop of protein powder simply can't replicate because they work with your biology, not just around it. You're not just feeding muscle tissue, you're nourishing the systems that control how that tissue is repaired and rebuilt. So if you're looking for one daily food that can dramatically shift how fast and how well you rebuild muscle, backed by neuroscience and real physiology, the answer is as simple and as powerful as the whole egg. The timing of nutrition, particularly after exercise, plays a far greater role in muscle recovery and growth than most people realize. We often hear, just hit your daily macros or protein is protein, but neuroscience and physiology show us something much more nuanced. The body, and more specifically the brain, operates in rhythms, windows of heightened sensitivity, where certain inputs create disproportionately greater outcomes. One of those windows opens right after physical training, and how you respond to it can quite literally double the efficiency of your recovery. When you finish a workout, your body is in a highly plastic, adaptive state. Neurologically, this is referred to as a period of heightened synaptic receptivity. Your nervous system is recalibrating, your muscles are sensitized to nutrients, and your hormonal environment is primed to absorb and utilize the fuel you give it. If you feed your body the right nutrients during this window, particularly protein and certain amino acids, you can accelerate muscle protein synthesis, enhance neural recovery, and reduce inflammation in a way that doesn't happen hours later. This window isn't open forever. Most evidence points to a 30 to 60 minute post-exercise period where nutrient intake is most effective in triggering anabolic processes. What makes this especially compelling is that the muscle isn't acting alone. The brain is actively interpreting the availability of nutrients to determine whether it's safe to shift energy from immune function and stress management to tissue repair. The presence of amino acids, especially leucine, and easily digestible whole foods like eggs or lean proteins, signals the nervous system to begin ramping up recovery. But timing isn't just about the biology of nutrients, it's also about behavioral reinforcement. When you eat deliberately after training, you're not just feeding muscles, you're strengthening a neural association between effort and reward. This association increases motivation, adherence, and even cognitive focus in future sessions. It's a loop: train, refuel, rebuild, that gets tighter and more effective every time you do it with intention. What's even more interesting is how this nutrient timing impacts neurotransmitter balance. Post-workout nutrition affects serotonin, dopamine, and even GABA levels, which all play a role in mood regulation, stress response, and sleep quality. In other words, that post-training meal doesn't just help you rebuild muscle faster, it can help you feel better, sleep deeper, and return to training more focused and recovered the next day. So while yes, hitting your daily nutrition goals matters, leveraging the timing of those nutrients, especially in the hour after training, gives you access to a window of amplified recovery that the brain and body are biologically programmed to respond to. Ignoring that window is like leaving progress on the table every single day. There's a fascinating and often overlooked layer to muscle recovery, and it has less to do with what's on your plate, and more to do with how your brain is processing your eating experience. Neuroscience shows us that the way you eat, the focus, the intention, even the state of your nervous system while eating, can dramatically influence how well your body utilizes the nutrients you consume. It's not just about macros and calories. It's about how deeply the brain and body are synchronized during the recovery process, especially around meals. When you eat in a distracted state, scrolling, working, watching something chaotic, your body enters what's known as a sympathetic or stress-driven state. In this mode, digestion is deprioritized. Nutrient absorption is less efficient. Enzyme release is impaired. Even blood flow to the gut is reduced. That means you could be eating the perfect post-workout meal, packed with leucine-rich protein and healthy fats, and still miss out on its full benefit, simply because your nervous system isn't in a place to process it effectively. Contrast that with a parasympathetic state, often called the rest and digest mode, where the body is calm, focused, and engaged with the act of eating. In this state, the vagus nerve activates digestive enzymes, gastric motility improves, and nutrient absorption increases. But more importantly, your brain registers that the recovery process is happening. That feedback loop between the gut and the brain enhances hormonal balance, reinforces neuromuscular recovery, and even supports mood regulation through neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which are heavily influenced by digestion and gut health. There's also a cognitive component here that influences performance over time. When you bring focused attention to your meals, whether it's chewing slower, breathing deeply between bites, or simply removing distractions, you create what's known in neuroscience as interoceptive awareness. That's your brain's ability to read internal signals from the body. Athletes with higher interoceptive awareness tend to recover faster, regulate effort more effectively, and have a more intuitive sense of when to push and when to rest. And it starts with something as simple as being present while you eat. This level of focus isn't just about digestion, it's about signaling safety. When the brain detects that the environment is calm and under control, it sends powerful messages to the rest of the body to shift into repair mode. Cortisol drops, muscle recovery increases, and energy is allocated toward rebuilding, rather than surviving. So while most people are chasing the next perfect protein formula, the deeper advantage comes from aligning your mental state with your physical goals, especially during something as foundational as eating. Because the truth is, your body doesn't just absorb nutrients, it responds to them. And that response is magnified or muted based on the quality of your attention.